Hey, Callie, thanks for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so just wanted to kind of get your input. We've been discussing a lot of big topics recently, and I think your perspective is really important, and it provides a unique perspective than kind of what I had seen holistically, and I thought you have a lot to add. So I just kind of wanted to start out with you introducing yourself, kind of what you're all about and what you're doing.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm Callie Ballinger. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, and I am a curriculum coordinator instructor. So, my job and what I do every single day is study the Bible and create biblical curriculums to teach. So, I have a very good background and basis in biblical text, which really ties into what we're experiencing now in our world. And, I think it's really important that we go back to this book a little bit for some guidance.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, from my understanding, growing up learning the Bible, there was one sort of aspect to it that never really rung true with me until I started looking into it a little bit more holistically and spiritually from that sort of sense. I think you've got a lot of good knowledge in the subject. So
Right.
I guess in general, just to kind of start us out, since we're both of us met from a perspective of seeking truth, looking to find the truth no matter where it lies and what's involved with seeking that. So uh, a lot of people kind of term that as like an awakening, or there are a lot of different terminologies for that. So I guess, can you describe your, like, when you started to question the norm, when you started to have these sort of larger scope awakening, as you might call it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, how I like to say it, I've had many different awakenings over my lifetime.
Yeah.
I feel like I came out of the womb just being like, why does this work? And, why is there money and all these kinds of things? And, a lot of the, how does the world run? Why does it run like this? And I was just kind of met with that question, it is what it is. And that question never suited me very well. I was like, no, like, why is it that way though? Can it change? All these things. So, from a little age, it just kind of burst. I had a big awakening when I was 8, and then they just kind of continued. But I like to think of like my great awakening is when it came to really studying the Bible stuff.
Okay.
So I got an opportunity, and it was actually September 2018. My dad told me, my dad's a missionary. So he goes to Africa, he's been all over the world, but we have a nonprofit that really tries to do self-sustaining projects. So, we work in those aspects. And he wanted to do what was called like a missions 201, where we want to go and teach now. Like, we want to spread the word. We want to change gears a little bit, still do that other stuff. So he presented me with this idea, and he was like, hey, I had graduated with an English degree, so I wanted to be a teacher, I wanted to be a writer. And he was like, hey, I want to go to Africa, I want you to write this 3-day conference on how to read the Bible. And he's like, we're going to go off how to read the Bible from the Bible Project series. I've got their permission, we're good. Like, can you put this all together for us? And we'll go over and teach to about a room of 40 pastors, which was a crazy experience, but that's a story for another time. So I did. So I started reading and learning about it, and I learned it in a different way than it was presented to me as a kid. And it was more from a literature standpoint. So I started understanding the Bible. You read it from beginning to end. It's not one of those things where you go when you open a page, And so once I started learning it in this aspect and really learning the Hebrew words and the Greek words,
Mhm.
it was just a big spiritual awakening that like still is unfolding, but really crescendoed in June when I put what I was learning with the Bible with what was going on with our world today with coronavirus and the lotus, like all of these things.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. That sounds really cool. So can you kind of elaborate on what you're seeing today, and what kind of, like, would you call them prophecies, or would you call them like,
I would call them prophecies. And it's actually, and this is what we'll kind of just go ahead and dive into if you don't mind.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I would kind of label, there's many prophecies in the Bible, obviously, but there's one overarching prophecy. And it starts in Genesis. And Genesis 3, chapter 3, and Revelation 12, which is actually Revelation, not Revelations. This is a huge misconception. And we'll get into that when we get to start talking about it.
Cool.
But Genesis chapter 3 and Revelation chapter 12, I mean, they connect so in sync, and it's the first book of the Bible and the last book. Well, it's all about this offspring. So I'm going to kind of talk and just go right into it. But I would call this whole prophecy. Michael Heiser, he's got a PhD in theology. All my work is peer reviewed. I'm not pulling it out of a hat. It's not my own stuff. It's, anything I say, go talk to these scholars too, so I would, overarching the prophecy, I would call it reversing Herman. So what this starts off with is actually the fall in Genesis. So you have the fall of the angels, the 1/3 of heaven, the corrupt angels fell. This is where you see Lucifer, they fell to earth. And so when they fell, well, actually, let's go back a little bit because we need to talk about the serpent. So you have Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, right? The Garden of Eden is representative of heaven on earth. It's, balanced, harmonious, beautiful place. And you have two trees in there. You have the tree of knowledge, which is good and evil, and the tree of life, which is, you're taking either from the tree of life, which is God's knowledge, and like not even like taking knowledge for your own, just trusting God, or the tree of good and evil, which has, the fruit. And that is, you now decide, you take that knowledge, God's knowledge, and you now take it and you decide, what's good and evil in your own human eyes, right? Because of the representation of the serpent in the Bible who talks to Eve about, take from this tree. Well, even then, like that serpent is actually not like a snake. Like it's not a snake that like dangles down. It's actually a serpent like mysterious creature. So it has legs, it has arms, it's like us, it just is in serpent form, right? And this is a big misrepresentation
Yeah.
because you're like, yeah.
So like an extraterrestrial kind of,
Right. Yeah.
something out of this world.
Yes, something out of this world, because this was part of the rebellion of like God's angels, right? This is 1/3 of that group, but there's like, and they were creatures, they were godlike, they were interfering in the Garden of Eden because, they wanted to hang with the lady.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and do all that. So that's actually, what causes a fall, right? Adam and Eve, which again, when you look at the Hebrew word, Adam means humanity. It doesn't mean just one man. And then Eve means life. So like from humans, life was created, right? From the rib. So these are things that are like, they're not new. They're just not described this way, especially in our Judeo-Christian era, right? But it's in your Bible. I'm not fooling you. But yeah, so from there you have the fall, and humans are cast out of the Garden of Eden, right? They're in the desert, which that's another metaphor. But from there they go to create Babylon. So Babylon is like our first new world order. And this is a term I later came to understand because, again, I had biblical knowledge, not knowledge of what's going on. So
Babylonian Empire, that's
they were trying to make a tower to heaven.
right, and that's like the first empire that we've kind of got in recorded history, right?
Right. So they go from the garden to Babylon. So in the Bible, if you go east, it's bad. If you go west, it's good. So they go east and do Babylon stuff.
Right.
So everyone speaks the same language. They're trying to do the androgynous thing. There's sacrifices, human sacrifices, children sacrifices. Like, it's a bad place. Like, it's where they literally humans with the, the creatures that were in the garden, the serpent creature. They're the ones giving them this information, like, hey, if you want to be like God, like you got to sacrifice humans. Well,
Right.
God's not about that. And so they literally redefined evil as good. And they were just like, whatever's, evil is now good, like human sacrifice is good. That's not God,
Right.
he doesn't want humans hurting other humans.
Right.
So after Babylon, you have the flood. So Noah's flood, right? And I'm skipping a little bit because it's such a
Right.
big,
Yeah.
big book. But after the flood, the whole reason the flood was there was to wipe out these creatures, right? Wipe out these reptilian kind of looking things. And it didn't work. So they did the flood, the 40 days, 40 nights, which again is a Bible code. Doesn't really mean 40 days, 40 nights. It just means a period of time.
Yeah.
And so after the flood, one of these creatures, they actually start taking like hybrid human form as apocalypse. That's like what the Hebrew word is for it. So it's literally a hybrid
Okay.
of one of these fallen corrupt creatures mating with one of Noah's descendants,
So
right?
they could better disguise themselves in that sort of
Mhm.
sense. Okay.
Yeah. So before they were more spiritual beings, they didn't really have bodies. And somehow after the flood, they were able to, now really mate, because when they first made it, it would create giants.
Mhm.
And that's where we see like giants in the Bible and stuff. And like in Greek mythology, that's titans and all. So yeah, so after this flood, they took on that apupula form, and there's actually like archaeological evidence of these beings, and they have different shaped skulls, and
Real
I
one.
mean, you can look
Yeah.
it up. Yeah. Like,
Yeah, no, there's some museum in Peru, I believe, where they have
mhm.
remnants of these crazy skulls just out on display, and it's like, people get put the theory of, the flattening of the forehead to create this, but the way that these skulls are set up, there's no way that you could actually increase the volume of your skull by placing a board on it. So the explanation that they give for why these skulls exist doesn't fit with how it actually worked.
No, and this is why, because they're hybrid forms. So it's like, and you see those skulls with like even royalty in
Right.
Europe.
Yes.
Yeah. So what it really is, like when you're talking about angels and demons in the Bible, like we would think of that as like almost aliens, like extraterrestrials, because they came from the heavens. So it's, but then you say aliens and people are like, oh, wait, what? But
Right.
you say angels and demons, they're like, oh, yeah, okay. you know?
Mhm. Just
Yeah.
beings not of this earth, extraterrestrial kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. So it's extraterrestrial, like it just is what it is. So there's different words, angels, demons, aliens. But they're all relatively the same thing. So yeah, so you have the Noah's flood, and then even then in the Old Testament, you still see this pattern of them trying to create a new world order. They do it with Mesopotamia, they do it with Sodom and Gomorrah, all of these, Israel, they try to do it with the temples. I mean, they're trying to do it now with the third temple of Israel.
Right.
And that's a code word for New World Order. So it's like, this is a never ending story. And it really starts with Babylon. Like, and so from that flood, like now you have these you know, hybrids running around that are completely, I mean, I would call them unconscious. They're corrupt. They're, totally ego driven. Like even Lucifer, like the reason why he fell is because he was so obsessed with his own beauty and his own power and intelligence. He wanted to be worshipped for it.
Right.
So like that's why the whole rebellion. He's like, you know, I want to be God.
And those, I mean, people who still ascribe to that type of belief, they view morality or God's kingdom as somehow this prison that they can't truly express themselves and do whatever they want because they're confined within morality of having to, be good to another. So they act in rebellion towards that.
Yeah, which is why they're so secretive about it now, and
Right.
why it's secret, societies, and like even the cabal, which is like a secret society that revolves around today rituals of children and just awful rituals that was started with the Brotherhood of Babylon. Like that, they still have a secret society about that, where they keep those lessons of knowledge that are just, they give you the ability of God, but not really, It's like it's the biggest trick that's been pulled on them. But it's just, so we see that whole pattern throughout the Old Testament. You can even see it with our world, right? Like, I mean, think about the last big new world order would probably be, besides them trying to do it now, would probably be Hitler, right? And it's the same thing. They are, and Hitler's trying to create, like, I mean, that was a whole war, but the genetic side of it, right? Manipulating genetics. I mean, that's what these Apukla were. They were genetically hybrids, right? So that's what Hitler's trying to do. And he's trying to make people have blue eyes and blonde hair. Well, that's from the Book of Enoch. Because the good beings, not all of them, because there's different beings, right? Some have wings, some don't have wings. The Book of Enoch, they're not described with wings, So it's like, I think that's why Hitler was so obsessed with those beings, because he thought they were, supernatural. So he's trying to make that.
Just to clarify for anyone, the Book of Enoch is it's a book of the Bible, or historically was a book of the Bible, that was removed later on because it's hard to find out the exact reasons why the book was removed, but a lot of people speculate, because you can still find it and read it today, but
Yeah.
a lot of people speculate that there was too much truth that didn't fit the narrative of us, the Bible being a limited story that doesn't apply to this sort of overarching story.
Right. So when you talk about it scholarly, how they'll express that idea, because it's like, if you read the Book of Enoch, you're like, wait a second. But scholarly, they'll be like, well, it's Second Temple literature. It doesn't fit into the narrative, it's, but the Catholic Bible still has it. Like, and it's just, yeah, it's a great book. And I think it's really important that people give that book a look at. Because it has a lot of the answers that we're looking for. And they had a big debate about whether to exclude Jude in the Bible, the book in the New Testament,
Wow.
because it referenced the Book of Enoch and talked about those same beings.
Interesting.
And like for years, they were trying to get that book out of the New Testament because it referenced the Book of Enoch.
Hmm.
So it's like, if you're trying to hide something that much, there's something in there. But yeah, so yeah, do you have any questions, or do you want me to?
Well, I mean, just to kind of expand on what you've covered, just the differentiation between these sort of occulted members who harness and hide away information in secret, and
Mhm.
the remnants of them tracing their lineage and tracing their history back to this Babylonian royalty where they believe that they started from. It's a crazy kind of concept to wrap your mind around, but the more that you look into what these people believe, and how they view information as this power to wield over, to create a hierarchy between those who know and those who don't know. And we see many examples of that happening today. And just talking about the Book of Enoch having been removed, and then different translations of the Bible going down to where the real hidden secrets within it are further diluted and watered down and removed,
Mhm.
all for the purpose of keeping that power and hierarchy away from the regular everyday people.
I know, and I actually have an example of this.
Yeah.
So when I study my Bible, like I do this big sucker. So this is the Hebrew and Greek,
Nice.
and it's like you open it up, you have Hebrew and then English right next to it. You have to like seriously have a magnifying glass.
I bet.
So one,
Are you fluent in both Hebrew and Greek?
what, not fluid, but it's like you can read it. And then I've been studying Hebrew,
Okay.
and it's weirdly the only language I can like speak pretty well. Like I've tried to do Spanish and French, and I'm like, oh, I was meant to do Hebrew.
Yeah.
But if you look in here, so I'm gonna like really, because this touches base on like how important these like beings are, like these hybrid godlike beings, right? So if you go to Psalm 82, Sorry, give me a second. I should have had that open. It talks about them being gods, right?
Mm.
So I meant to tell you, after Babylon, they appointed 12 rulers over the land. So God got fed up with Babylon. And he was like, if y'all think y'all can do a better job, have at it. I'm breaking up this nation into 12 tribes, but I get Israel. Like that's me. That's my section. You 11 try, like try to be like me. So when he does this, it's in Psalm 82. And he talks about it as he sits in front of a council of gods, right? So he's not saying rulers. So in your Hebrew version, you have, Yahweh sits in a council of gods, right? Little gods.
Mm.
And this would be those angels. And he's distributing, these different lands that you're going to rule. Well, in your Hebrew version, it says gods. But I have one English version that says rulers, and it's Israel rulers. Well, that wouldn't really make sense at that time anyway, because even though I said Israel, he owns that land, that wasn't a thing at the time. So why the Bible says the rulers of Israel, the 12 rulers of Israel, that's, it's irrelevant. And even in this version, you have God presides in the great assembly. He gives judgment among the gods. But in this English version, gods is like this. And it's not real. And they have a note and it's probably human rulers. And it's no, it's not. And that's when the English translation really screws you over. Because it is. It's, and then you have the whole, well, there's only one God. There's no other gods. They're all idols. That's not what the Bible says. Even when you open Genesis and Exodus, it's talking about Ra, the god of Egypt, So to dismiss the idea that there aren't these other beings is to actually dismiss the idea that God's more powerful than them, right?
Right. Yeah, because there is absolutely one infinite creator that stems from all of this, but why is it so difficult to believe that there could not be, other beings below God that are much more powerful than maybe we can comprehend? Not
Exactly.
necessarily the one creator, but definitely
Right.
that sort of hierarchy of influence.
Yeah. So, that's what the angels are. Archangel Michael, these are these beings. You either have the 2/3 that are still in union with God or the 1/3 that isn't.
Mm.
And it does that's one of the things that the importance of having those gods and those other 11 tribe member gods that are in charge of these things really makes the story even more powerful about God's power to overtake them.
Right.
Because what separates God from these other gods is God has the ability to take darkness away. None of the other gods really have that. Most beings are kind of a polarity of negative and positive energy.
Really gray kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Your yin and your yang. Well, God's the only one that he is the creator. So he can, boom, I'll take darkness out, he does that. But again, it's not this, it's a slow taking it out,
Sure.
And that's where we kind of go to the idea of Judgment Day,
Right.
right? We think it's going to be one big day. Well, no, because in the Hebrew Bible, when you talk about a day, it could be one day, but mainly the times it's talking about is a 2,000-year period.
Mm.
So this would be the perfect prime time for that revelation, that book in the Bible to kind of come back around.
Right.
Because we're 2,000 years from that point of Jesus.
Right.
Yeah.
So it'd be on that same sort of cycle, but perhaps on a bigger scale of that revealing of us going through that transitional stage to sort of fully understand where we've been and not that there wasn't a reason for us to go through all this, but it was to I guess remember or step back into our um, understanding of being true children of God, and that we don't have to be subject to that kind of world or that kind of
Exactly. Yeah, like that. And it just is. It's how the pace of nature goes. Like when you have the Bible, it was created in 7 days. Well, 7 periods of time, like it's not just that one day, it took, but it's to Hebrew people, like people who are reading it in Hebrew and Jewish people, and especially from the ancient time, they understood, oh, a day means a period, like a 2000 period,
Mhm.
year period, or however you want to put that. So for us, we're such modern day readers that we take everything point blank.
Right.
And that's the biggest mistake when you come to the Bible, because it's all metaphors.
Yeah.
Like it's all epic poems, and it has a very specific code. And if you don't read the code and understand the code, it's going to go over your head and you're not going to get the cool part about it, So it is, because it's all, those codes, scholarly, they talk about them as hyperlinks, right? So we can go into the Jesus story and I'll tell you the hyperlinks that like are so cool, that bring it back to Genesis all the way to Revelation.
Yeah. I think, I
Yeah.
mean, you got the examples. It sounds awesome.
Yeah, so we'll jump into it. So we actually see this promise of a Messiah, and you got to remember Messiah is a title, and I'll get into that in a second. But Jesus Christ, Messiah title. So you see the promise of this in Genesis 3:14 and 15. And this is when God is talking to that serpent creature, right? He's sitting there and he's cursing the snake. But again, that's a metaphor for this being. And he says, I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. And he will crush your head and you will strike his heel. So let me go into a little bit about that, because if you read it just like that, you're like, what? So what he's saying, this is when the serpent and these other fallen angels were trying to mate with the women, right? They were trying to use their seed to create their own hybrid, beings, essentially. And so this is what he's saying, because offspring is very important. So when he says, I'm going to create this, like, essentially children of the dark, children of the light, this is where you get this idea from. So the offspring of the serpent is this idea of the children of the dark, right? And then the woman is the idea of like human, made in God image, their offspring. So these two offsprings from the serpent and then just human offsprings are going to battle each other. Like this is where we get this whole idea. And so when we first get to there, he says, you like Jesus, because this is what it's actually talking about. The offspring of the woman is Jesus, is like the one who's going to overpower them. So he says, Jesus will crush your head, but you will bite his heel. So if you go to like Jesus and his mission, which was all about taking down this, all about taking down Cabal, all the, crazy stuff, that was his mission. And so when you go to that, he did die, and that's what the biting of the heel is. But then you get to Revelation and Jesus comes back, and now that serpent is a dragon. And so it's still the reptilian family, but it's gotten bigger. And then Jesus comes back in Revelation 12 and completely destroys it. So it's like the first time it's going to smash you on the head and you're going to bite it on the foot. And like, that's what it did, because the Jesus revolution, like, kind of enlightened us all to
Yeah,
this.
it disrupted that whole power structure at the time, He came in,
Right.
and it was like, what are you guys doing? Like listening to these men telling you that you have to have someone between you and God
Mm-hmm.
when you are a child of God. I mean, you get to do, like, I love the concept of how he came and said that, all of these things that I can do, you can do as well. And I'm
Yeah.
paraphrasing it, but just to give that example
Yeah.
of what he was trying to instill into the people, and it showed.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it was, at this time before Jesus, they were using the priest, and, obviously there's always good and bad with people, but, the ones at the higher up weren't that great. And like, and they're listening to their leaders. And that's what you were saying. Jesus was like,
Yeah.
like, listen to God, like these people don't have control over you.
Mhm.
And but yeah, so that's kind of the first prophecy that we see about the Messiah, and how he'll get bit one time, but then he's going to come back and he's just going to take it all out. Like really kill it. And it's even bigger by the time he comes back because the devil knows that he doesn't have much time.
Right.
So he's trying to get as much momentum as he can. But yeah, so this offspring of the woman, that actually goes back to Revelation 12, and you see the exact same verses almost. It's like, again, talks about the offspring of the woman coming back with the snake. So it's really that connected with the very first book of the Bible and the very last book of the Bible,
Wow.
with Jesus being the link between. So yeah, so we have that because Jesus is a big part of these prophecies, like, so it's kind of like you got to talk about him. And it is. So you have the genealogy of Jesus, which is like fulfills the prophecies of Isaiah and Ezekiel. He'll come from the line of David. Isaiah said he'll die in servitude to like for the masses. Like, and Isaiah was like, I think 500 odd years before Jesus, and what did he do? Jesus died for all of humanity, servitude, in the like most service way that you could die.
Mhm.
So it all just comes together. But what's really important is the importance of Jesus's birth.
Mm.
So the astrology. And do you have any questions before I get into this?
No, no, I'm happy to
Okay.
hear that.
All right. So this is actually kind of highlighted in Romans 10. But what's so interesting about Jesus's birth and how the three wise men knew Jesus was coming, they were astrologers. Okay. Like they followed the star, they were like straight up astrologers. So they knew that when the planets align in this certain way, a divine king is going to be born. Right. So they knew because they studied the stars. They had great knowledge on it. So if you were at this time, before Jesus' birth, or even in the Old Testament, you would have this already understanding. Like, we don't have that understanding, but, they would be like, yeah, when they saw the star, that signaled the Messiah. We just hear a star in Jesus. But his birth would have alerted like the masses at this time. Like they would have known, and they would have known the Messiah is arriving because of the line. Like it describes a line has gone out through the heavens, right? This line is actually, and again, this is like scholarly biblical text. This line actually refers to the ecliptical line
Okay.
that follows the zodiacs. So this is where you have the astrology of them and, the zodiacs. So again, it talks about in the sky, there will be a woman with 12 stars around her head. And so this is, I believe, Virgo is this zodiac. And the sun will be in her midst and the moon at her feet. So this was prophesied before Jesus was even born. And it will be in conjunction of Regulus and Jupiter. So the king star with the king planet. And it will be in the like constellation of Leo, right? So this is where we get from the lion, the tribe of Judah, the Lion of Judah, which is another word for Jesus Christ.
Mm.
So when we hear the lion, we just think, oh, it's imagery. They're talking about like, no, 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 no. This is like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
this guy we're talking about. So when you look at this on an astrological map, it would have his birthday as September 11th, 3 BC. Okay, so not Christmas,
Right.
but yeah, so where this is important is, and I hope I'm saying this right, this date is also considered Tishra 1. Okay, so that is like an Old Testament date, and it's the date that an inauguration of a new king would come,
Mm.
right? So there, in this time, they would appoint kings on this date, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So him being born there, and it's also the birth date of Noah. So Noah, yeah. So Noah, who was the one who built the ship to try to get rid of all these people, Apokala, all that kind of stuff. He was born on the same birthday as Noah.
Wow. And the cross, like the similarities between both of those stories of how before or when Noah was born, how all of the firstborn sons or all the men at the time, the little boys at the time were killed
Yeah.
by Pharaoh in power. And then when Jesus was born, same thing. They were trying to be killed to get rid of that. Um, they knew that prophecy was coming of someone that was going to sort of usurp their
Exactly.
power and break down that new world order that they had built at the time.
Yeah, because they knew that baby, if it was born and it survived, would, bring it down, like would bring the whole thing down, you
Right.
know. So it's very cool. So these prophecies, like, were way ahead before even Jesus got there, and then he fulfilled all the prophecies of what that Messiah would hold, So it really is cool. But if we're going, yeah, to like the firstborns like being killed, we see that in Egypt, right? And we see it with the 10 other plagues. You've got the blood in the Nile, frogs, gnats, flies, livestock, which we had to remember with COVID. They shut down all those
Oh yeah, the meat
meat things.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, because the livestock then got diseases. So it's like it ends up, boils, hail, lotus, and like that, it's the year of that. They were
Right.
all over Africa. They were like causing a famine. And even that with that year, it's so predictable because of their migration pattern that if you were creating a new world order, because this is what they do, they try to create that new world order using these 10 pieces of chaos because chaos creates order.
Right.
And then you see God using their, 10 little things to try to create the new world order, and he uses it against them
Mm.
and like actually punishes them for it. Because the last plague was throw your firstborn baby into the Nile because they were trying to prevent a Messiah.
Right.
So it's like all tied up. But Jesus made it, like he did and then fulfilled so much. But yeah, so that kind of is the overlay. And then yeah, you go to Revelation. And wait, first off, do you have any questions before I continue?
No, well, I think we've gone a lot into the overarching story, but I think drawing on to more similarities in what we're seeing today would be really cool to kind of go into.
Right. So yeah, so with the 10 plagues that we're seeing today, like and I kind of showed you
Mhm.
this chart and I don't know how to pull it up here, but yeah, we have the 10 plagues again. And I was actually in seminary school when I was like learning about the 10 plagues, and they were all my like teachers were like practice lamenting,
Mhm.
like we've seen this before. But yeah, so you have like what I believe the modern day ones are is coronavirus.
Mhm.
I think, we have,
That Vampire Weekend album cover is
yes,
what you're referring to.
yes. So there's on the Vampire Weekend Harmony Hall music video, there is the Tree of Kabbalah.
Okay.
Um, yeah. And I can, yeah, if you want to go into that, I can then like pinpoint. I don't know if you can bring it up. Yes. Okay. So when you look at this, all these things represent. So this is in the Vampire Weekend, like Harmony Hall music video, and this was done in 2019, right? So before any of this stuff was going on, and we believe this is the chart. Me and some other people believe this is the chart that they were trying to use to induce the new world order. So like when you go from beginning, you see there that would be nuclear, or if God intervenes, that would be a lifesaver, right? So we could either end a nuclear war or God saves us before then, right? So you also have the serpent again, the snake with all that. And so you have a Messiah looking thing right here. So an angel with wings and a halo, right? So that's, to me, when I take it in the order of like, it's already been intervened and God's already taken care of this, that would be representative of Jesus, new Messiah. But when I was first understood about this and was being explained, someone thought that that was the fall of the royal family.
Mm.
So Meghan Markle and Harry leaving, which I can totally see. So then if you go up, yeah, either way.
This one?
Yeah. So that is actually the same eclipse. It happened in 2017. It's the same eclipse that happened with Jesus's birthday.
Mhm. Interesting.
So it's, you have to have that eclipse, which is a very powerful eclipse. Then you go over this way. You have the wildfires of Australia. And then we also saw, in South America as well. and then you go up. See the flies? I take that as a lotus, since it is the year, or locust, sorry, no, the locust, since it is the year of that, and they have been plaguing Africa. It's creating famines.
Mhm.
So then if you go up this way,
This one or the other one?
the other one, see the rise. So that's the rise in the stock market. So right before coronavirus hit, the stock market was doing really well. Trump had it up there. It was a rising for sure.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the other side, that is a signal of coronavirus, right? Then you go, yeah. So then you go up, that's 5G towers. And then you go up this way. Either way. Yeah. So that would be cosmic aligning, and it has to do with three. It has to do with like a revolution, all these things. I can find out more about that and get that back to you. But then it's just an event that has to take place cosmically, stars aligning.
Mhm.
And then if you go this way, you see hurricanes. So that's hurricane season. And right when I was learning about this, it was like the week hurricane season started, and it was like apparently like gonna be the worst one. Like already they were like had seen 3 tropical storms that could be it. So, and if you know about Bill Gates and his satellite with the moon and hurricanes, makes sense. So if you go up, that's the frogs. And that was for me personally, what really solidified what I thought was going on. Because I immediately saw this and I thought of the 10 plagues of Egypt, like just right then and there. So I woke up the next morning. I had no idea what the frogs were about. I was like, okay, this is, I guess, coming or happening. So, and this was such a God thing, because just how I was led to all this was such a God thing. So I wake up the next morning. The first thing I see on Facebook is like picture of the Russia oil spill. It's a river and it's red. Well, in Egypt, when the river turned red, frogs hopped out of it,
Mhm.
right? So that kind of to me was like God being like, okay, see these similarities, whether the frog was that or not, but like, yeah. And so then you go up to 2021. Look, it looks like a UFO with 2021. Again, this music video was in 2019, February 2019. And so this is what we believe will be a fake alien attack invasion if that happens.
Right.
And that's what we believe the New World Order, and the global elite and the cabal were trying to do to really make that world order go through. But it has, I believe, been intervened. And we just kind of have to see at this point.
Yeah, and just to give anyone a little background who might be new to the subject, so there's so many examples of um, secret symbology hidden within many, many, many different versions of artwork and movies and shows and things like that, where they kind of convey messages to each other on giving out plans of what's going to happen. And pictures can be a very good way of hiding secret messages within them. And this symbol in general is the Kabbalah, which is a very, very powerful symbol, just in general. Um, so it's kind of interesting that this seemingly just random band would insert this kind of symbology into their work. Like somebody went into a lot of work to design each of these and was very carefully chosen. So like, why would they do that if it was just random, unless they were trying to mean something else to it,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting.
Yeah, because it is, because and they also will implant these kind of images because their motto is you have to give the cattle a fighting chance.
Mhm.
And so for them, they're like, okay, well, we left our images. Like, it's
Yeah,
just humans don't know what those images mean, you
right.
know?
It's,
Um,
it's like our the more that they can put across to us, the more that we tacitly agree, because they've, like you said, they've shown their plans to us, and if we don't do anything to stop it, then by our silence we are agreeing, we're acquiescing, and
yeah.
going along with
And,
it.
right. And the more we listen to it and view it, we're giving more free will to it. We just don't know that's what's happening
Right.
because that's how, like, darkness operates. Like these kind of people, they don't really abide by the real rules of free will, where like when it comes to God and like your angels and all of that, you really have to pray and set intentions and give them permission to come intervene. Like that's because that's how it's supposed to be. But another really interesting thing, and this really is the summer of awakening. Like I'm seeing people awaken so much. I had a big awakening. We're all coming to this like, okay, wait, is there a global elite that is like running
Right.
our thing and doing crazy stuff? So on the sides of it, it says, we took a vow in summertime. So it's like now is the time where you take your vow. Like, what side do you stand? Do you wake up? Do you not wake up? And I don't think God's a bad God. I think some people just aren't awake, and he's going to wake them up when it's time. But it really is. It's like, where do you stand? And this whole song, Harmony Hall, is about how on New Year's Eve, everything's going to explode and all that. And that brings me back to apocalypse because and the meaning of that, because the apocalypse, when we see it in movies in our modern day, is like everything's going to blow up, asteroids going to hit the earth, blah 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 blah. And that's not true. It's actually a truth that's being revealed.
Right.
And that's
The word apocalypse in Greek, right,
yeah,
is means revealing.
yeah, a truth revealed. Yeah, like a revealing. And what that truth is this global elite, this cabal, these, hybrid, like
These,
this,
you know,
yeah.
and all of the dark, really, whatever sort of dark, nasty filth you can possibly imagine. Like these people are into that because, like we discussed earlier, they truly view morality as this prison, and they want to invert the entire system. Bring it all up to the top, to where that sort of filth is at the top instead of God's love, the unconditional love. They view that as a trap.
Yeah, like even with the toys we're seeing, like we got a message about the toys this morning,
Right.
and it's like it really is like it's not it's crazy how long it's been going on, but it's like they've even got more gusto
Yeah.
nowadays, like
Well,
because it really. Oh, go ahead.
well, I just think that kind of indicates, their knowledge of running out of time. Like there's not they're going to have to be a lot more bold with trying to convince and coerce and um, get people to join onto their side of this darkness and this filth, because they
Right.
know that the time is coming up, and after that point, it's all do or die kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's why they really are. I mean, they're in panic mode, so they're not as stealth as they were back in the day, but they're also, yeah, they have nothing to lose anymore.
What I mean, just an example. I mean, there was that statue of Moloch, I believe, that was erected in the Vatican.
Yeah.
Like what? this
I mean,
this god that they sacrifice children to is
yeah.
erected in the supposedly one of the holiest places, if you believe that, which is wild, right out in the open.
Yeah. Well, did you know that their telescope, I think we talked about this, their telescope is literally abbreviated to Lucifer. Like, they're not, like, once you're awakened to it, because I think there comes such a cognitive, like,
Dissonant.
dissonance when it comes to, because you're like, there's no way. Like,
Yeah,
there's no way.
hard to believe.
It's hard to believe, but then once you do, it's like you see it everywhere and you're like, oh, how could I have been so blind? Like, but it's, again, it's, it's not our fault. Like, we're not the ones, behind the strings. It's these people. But yeah, but again, yeah, it's just kind of nuts. And what was I gonna say?
Yeah,
Sorry.
what are some other examples of stuff that's going on today that
Relate.
you can relate to based on this?
Yeah, so let's look at Revelation real quick. Um, because again, there's something to do with trumpets that are labeled in Revelation and President Trump.
Mm.
So, and this was all by a prophet named Clement. Okay, have you heard of him?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you gotta look into him. It's gonna blow your mind.
Okay.
So he actually died in 2016. But before that, he was just prophesying. Like, he prophesied 9/11 in 1996.
Wow.
And so called it to a T. There's going to be a terrorist attack. And he called it again and said, the God/king of the East will like rage a war with America. And we'll call it Mother of All Wars. Well, then in 2019, you have an article where, I hope I'm saying this name right. Ronnie, he's the president of Iran, says the exact same thing. He's like, this is the mother of all wars. Like, so it's like,
Right after it happened.
no, I think
Or
I have to do more research on when that guy said it, but it was just, I mean, this guy, to me, Kim Clement would be the modern day John Baptist,
okay.
if that makes sense. Like, he was just calling out these prophecies right before everything went down, where typically you see prophecies longer. But yeah, so he called that out. And, what I was researching related to, the president of Iran saying the exact same thing as this guy. But what's interesting are his prophecies about Trump. Okay. One of the earliest ones I found was like 2004. Like, he's talking about Trump being president then. And yeah, so, and even then, so I'm going to go through some of his prophecies. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Right. So, you have Trump. Okay, this is in 2013. So, Trump will become a trumpet. So he's prophesizing, he's channeling, right? Well, trumpet is very relevant in Revelation because you have you heard of the seven scrolls and the seven angels and the seven trumpets?
Vaguely.
Okay, that's like a whole other, like, we probably need a whole another YouTube for that. But yeah, so seven trumpets is like very adamant in this, and seven in the Bible means completeness, achievement.
Okay.
So that's just like a little side note. But yeah, so this guy claims, and again, his prophecies have come true. Like, this is not just somebody, he says Trump will become a trumpet, God will use him as a trumpet, which relates to Revelation and how Jesus will come with trumpets, right? I will raise up, I will raise up the trump to become a trumpet. And Trump is also interesting because remember when I was telling you about how the prophecy where the heel got bit and then he'd come back and it would be a dragon? Well, they use specifically the word triumph, like over, and like the dragon. So you have trumpet, triumph, all have Trump in them. Pretty cool. Anyway, yeah. So in 2007, he goes, God says, I will open the door you have prayed about, and when it comes to the election, you will win. So he actually calls Trump out at this. And this is 2007. Like, is Trump even thinking about running? Like, and he's like, Trump, I know you're listening to me. He's like, I will open the door,
He
and
actually, he actually speaks to him directly in that.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
To him and a guy named Clark. He also mentions like Roger Stone's name, like all these people. Like, it's you gotta look him up. He's cool. But yeah, so anyway, he claims that we'll have a praying president instead of like a really religious president. So he'll be a praying one. So he'll really be in contact with God. And the one who's chosen to like fulfill this prophecy to like save, humanity essentially from these evil, because he even talks about these global elites. He says, the one that's chosen will have hot blood. He'll bring walls of protection. Economy shall change rapidly. He'll have 2 terms. He'll be baptized in the office. And this is all in 2007. And what did he do? He built a wall, and that's when he was talking to Trump, like all that. So like 2014, like he's saying, how do we kill the giant? The giant he's referring to, and again, he's channeling God. So it's one of those things you have to look back. The giant is what we're going through, all the people behind Bill Gates, everyone behind the COVID, behind all the chaos, trying to enact this new world order. That's a giant. And it's like, how do we kill the giant? And it's like, I have placed this man amongst you, to be able to defeat it. Those who reject him will be shocked how he does take down the giant, right?
Everyone's shocked no matter how you look at it.
Yeah. but that's exactly what I had. Because when I came, to this big awakening and everything going on, I was never political, but I wasn't like pro Trump. I didn't really care that much. But I was amazed at like how it seems he's handling all this, all the executive laws in place and all that kind of stuff. But we'll keep going. But yeah, 2011, president with no fear, he's decisive, so, and like from his presidency, a source of energy will like erupt. So it's like that source of energy would be the Great Awakening. And it's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And for anyone listening who because I was definitely on the fence about Trump for the longest time, and still even with this, it's hard to wrap around because it seems so much larger than life. But
Mhm.
I'd really invite everyone to kind of just keep an open mind about what's happening and really take a look at, and if there was evidence of this sort of spiritual war that's going on between the light and the darkness, you really got to see who's aligned with what sort of practices. And to me, like child trafficking and this pedophilia stuff that's being constantly hidden by those
Mhm.
within the media and all this other stuff, like that's a very clear indicator of that sort of same child sacrificing energy of preying on innocence and that sort of thing that needs to be looked at. So I think it all starts to make sense a lot more. And I think as we go forward, we're going to see a lot more physical signs for anyone who might actually need it. But I
Yeah.
would just challenge everyone to kind of have an open mind as we
Yeah.
go forward, because who knows? But this kind of stuff's all happening, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I agree because how I am, I'm like, trust God first, just see what happens after that.
right. Yeah,
Um,
trust that it's all going to work out. And um, yeah, so we're coming out up on about an hour of time, so I don't want to
yeah,
keep going forever. But do you have any kind of like closing thoughts, or you want to wrap up anything in particular that you want to cover?
no, I think I kind of covered it all because my main thing was I wanted to give the overarching biblical prophecy and how it really does tie in today.
Right.
And then just, again, it's just a really fascinating um, story that's been happening for thousands and thousands of years, and now we're seeing it really come to the light with, our technology.
Yeah.
And, they tried to use it against us and we made it for the better. So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's absolutely fascinating. I think there's so much truth that can be found from ancient texts, like the Bible, but it's not limited to, really, really, and I spoke about this with you the other day, but really focusing on your own inner discernment on what is truth. Truth as in truth is godliness, in the sense that truth is going to be enlivening, it's going to be expanding, like you're going to be learning more from it. um, and so you can really kind of pick apart what aspects are inserted by man to sort of keep that truth hidden away and keep us in a state of hierarchy and subversion and slavery, essentially.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's really important to kind of
Yeah.
use all realms of truth wherever they come.
Right. Yeah. So that's just my realm. My realm is biblical and it just ties in so nicely. Sorry, my dog is also like ready to get outside.
Yeah.
So he's my friend, but
Well, I
yeah.
appreciate you spending the time talking about this, and yeah, maybe we can do another one later on and dive into any particular topic a little bit more deeply.
Oh yeah, because I just wanted to give that overview. I mean, you can dive real deep.
Yeah,
So yeah.
cool. Well, I appreciate it, Callie, and
Yeah.
yeah, we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks for
Yeah,
having
no problem. Thanks for coming.
me.
Bye.